If you're someone who's tired of modern day Hollywood stories, this video is for you. Welcome back to A2HEROES, guys. A2HEROES follows the story of Black Dragon and Pink Firefly. Black Dragon and Pink Firefly is a comic book series for people who are tired of modern day Hollywood stories. No wokeism, no girl bosses, no left wing bullshit, no right wing bullshit, no feminism, no lecturing. Just good stories. Alright? Today we're going to go over a video by Unorthodox, and it's called Why There Will Never Be Another Spider-Man Movie Like This Again. It's going to go over the Amazing Spider-Man released in 2012, the Andrew Garfield one, and talk about why it's realistic and gritty setting, makes it more grounded, relatable, and emotional. I really like that version of Spider-Man. Really like that version of Spider-Man. I love the Sam Raimi series. I grew up with those. And I like the Tom Holland series. I'm seeing those right now. But Andrew Garfield had a special place in between both of them, and he did a really good job. So I'm going to go through this video and pause it from time to time just to add my comments and my thoughts as he goes. But it's a phenomenal video by Unorthodox. I'm going to like it right now. Okay, let's begin.
When someone asks me what my favourite Spider-Man movie is, I feel that there's an expectation for me to say Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, No Way Home or Into the Spider-Verse. But ever since the release of The Amazing Spider-Man on the 3rd of July 2012, which I was lucky to see on release day, it has remained my favourite Spider-Man movie for 14 years. And I don't think there will ever be another Spider-Man movie like this again. Now, I've always thought this movie is one of the most overhated comic book films of all time. Genuinely, I can't think of another one. Actually, I can. Spider-Man 3, but that's a conversation for another video. It felt like Tasm was fighting an uphill battle right from the beginning, coming off of the back of the Raimi trilogy, which to some is like a religion, and in the eyes of them, the Amazing Spider-Man movies were taking away their beloved Spider-Man 4, which just wasn't true. Compound that with the fact that this iteration of Spider-Man deviates heavily from the norm, and it was always going to be controversial. From a personal standpoint, I've always naturally been drawn to darker, more grounded versions of superheroes in fictional media. It's why I love the Batman, Netflix's Daredevil, Not Whatever This Is, and even Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, despite it deviating from what we all know Superman to be.
I like what he said there about the darker, more grounded version of superheroes. I agree with that in terms of Spider-Man and in terms of Batman, The Dark Knight Rises. Personally, with Man of Steel, as much as I like that, I didn't fully overall like the whole movie. It felt empty and lackluster to me, even though it's much better than the new Spider-Man or the new Superman that came out. But even Man of Steel back then, I remember distinctly thinking, oh, they could have done so much more with the Superman character. And it was very controversial back then in the past when he killed Zod. But that was one of the things that made it grounded and realistic and gritty, right? But it was very character breaking for Superman to do that sort of thing, to like viciously snap someone's neck. Like, even though it was like, quote unquote, the last option, it still felt very un-Superman like. He's a Boy Scout. He's not supposed to be out here cranking people's necks like Solid Snake. So I get what he means, but just for my own personal taste, the Man of Steel wasn't my cup of tea. Let's keep going.
Well, a lot of comic book fans don't like grittier takes on a lot of superheroes, especially Superman and Spider-Man, who are supposed to be symbols of hope, inspirational, and their respective stories are usually beaming with colour, as if ripped straight from the pages of the source material itself. And I do get that, when something has been a certain way for a while, you're naturally less inclined to want change, right? However, I find this type of comic book media to be even more compelling because the fact that they feel as if they could take place in reality always adds a bit more relatability and nuance to the stories. I believe these films constantly get us to view the superhero genre in a completely different lens, what I like to call the what if or elseworld lens. They pivot away from the good feel of comics and root their stories in a layer of emotion and vulnerability, constantly reinforcing the question, what if these superheroes were real? And I connect a hell of a lot more with comic book movies when they treat these characters like flawed people instead of just symbols or something to constantly look up to. And that's just one of many aspects about The Amazing Spider-Man that I really love. Peter is so flawed in this film, it's actually eerily relatable. For instance, he harbors so much resentment for the beating he takes by Flash at the beginning of the movie that once he gets his powers, he doesn't use it responsibly, in fact opting to use them to merely embarrass Flash. Which, let's be honest, we all would have done ourselves.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. There was nothing wrong with that. After being beaten mercilessly in front of people, he finally got the power to be able to overcome his bully. and embarrassed him, just mocked him in front of everyone. I agree with that. That's the way to do it. There's absolutely no reason you should get great power and then the people who slighted you on the way up, you should just ignore them. That's a completely human feeling and we all relate to it. Like when we're powerless, when we're victims, we want someone to be our champion. Well, now the universe has empowered you and giving yourself to be a champion, giving you yourself a chance to be a champion. So you should use it. You should use it. So I agree with that. And like Unorthodox here said, a lot of us would do that too as well. So we completely understand. That's right.
Even after Uncle Ben pulls him up on this,
So all this is about getting even. If so, I guess you must feel pretty good about yourself now, right?
Anne has the whole responsibility talk.
If you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things.
His whole vigilante arc is still centered around getting revenge, which only comes to an end once Captain Stacy brings to light the fact that his targets all share similar appearances.
He's hunting down a bunch of criminals that all look the same, like he's got some sort of personal vendetta.
Now, many might frame this as the story needlessly going around in circles just to nail home the exact same point. But I see it as a relatable experience in the sense that sometimes people need to hear things more than once or make the same mistake a few times in order for a message to hit home. So when that message finally does hit home on the bridge, you can really see the weight of Uncle Ben's words hitting Peter as he grapples with the decision to go after the lizard or save the kid in the car.
If you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things. Not choice, responsibility.
And in retrospect, this is one of my favourite moments in the film because usually Spider-Man stories have Peter figure out who he needs to be by the time he puts on the suit. However, in this movie, it almost does it in the reverse. Peter puts on the suit and is still the same vengeful person he was prior to making it. It's only when he does the act of good that he stops chasing after the car thief entirely and becomes Spider-Man.
Who are you?
That's a really good point. Sometimes people need to hear the same thing more than once before it finally sinks in and it makes sense. And this movie does depict that in a very cool and cinematic way. And they also reverse the order of priority when it comes to Spider-Man's purpose as a hero. Usually he finds his purpose before he dons the suit and then goes on to do great acts of justice and stuff. But in this case, he dons the suit first and then he finds his purpose. So in the meanwhile, he's doing acts of vigilantism and acts of vengeance and things like that. So it gives a bit more significance to his hero's journey. I like it.
Spider-Man.
Now, another thing I love about this movie that is so unique I don't think we're likely to see anything like it again in a Spider-Man movie is the suit.
It was perfect. Perfect.
I'm of the opinion that this is the best Spider-Man suit on the big screen, and actually, you know what?
I'll do you one better.
It's the best Spider-Man suit I've ever seen. Now, unfortunately, I cannot tell people they're wrong for not liking it as much as I would love to, but man does this suit look so badass during darker scenes, and it very much fits the dark, more grounded tone of the movie. I actually really appreciate how realistic the suit is, still mimicking elements of a comic book suit. It heavily leans into realism with Peter using sunglass lenses, tennis shoe soles, gloves, or even a watch as the basis of his web shooters.
Yeah, I really like that. That's cool. I like the tennis shoe soles for the feet. That's a really cool design. Nice work. And then the sunglasses for the visors, really nice. Like, he was really ingenious here in making the suit, and I love that.
Which not only helps to reinforce how much of a genius he is, the athletic streamlined look to the suit really does help to accentuate Andrew's more spider-like movements in this film. And that's another thing that's so unique to TASM. I know it happens in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but there was a real emphasis on the spider aspect of Spider-Man in this film. The directors really went out of their way to showcase how Peter adopts spider-like qualities. For instance, not long after being bitten, he starts to camp out in high vantage points around his house.
Peter. What are you doing up there?
Similarly to how spiders usually take high points. Another example was Spider-Man setting up the web trap in the sewers to detect which angle the lizard was going to attack from, and then obviously he attacks from above, which is actually sick when you think about it because it's a game of predators at the end of the day. Both spiders and lizards are predators, and in a prior conversation between Peter and Dr. Connors, it was stated that lizards are kings of their respective food chains.
How would a predator track a reptile?
No, they don't. Most reptiles are at the top of their respective food chain. Kings of their domain.
So it wasn't a surprise that Lizard was able to get a one-up on Spider-Man in this scene.
Nice. I really like the scene in the sewers where he puts out the web traps everywhere and just sends several web lines down into several different tunnels and then just sits for hours in the middle waiting for one of them to go off. That was a cool way where he embraced the spider. He wasn't just a guy with spider-like powers. He became the spider, for lack of a better term. So such a cool integration of his powers that made him more than just a guy who can shoot webs and stick to surfaces. They adopted the physiology and the psychology of a spider, and they showed that, like, especially when he's hanging out at high vantage points in his house, sitting on top of the roof outside, hanging upside down from his bedroom, like, just cool things like that. I really like those touches. He's right.
Now we're on the topic of the lizard, I wanted to touch on him briefly before I discuss the biggest aspect that made The Amazing Spider-Man so different to any other Spider-Man movie. So if you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that I think this adaptation of Lizard is amazing, pun intended. I'm of the opinion that the unorthodox direction they took the lizard in is the best direction I've seen taken for the character. Like I mentioned in that video, I do really like some other designs, especially Marvel's Spider-Man 2's lizard, which just screams absolute beast. But I think the humanoid design works well for the grounded approach of the movie, as it makes more sense having a half human, half lizard running around than a full-blown lizard, which would take away from that sense of realism. I also believe with the design, which a lot of people didn't like, and I totally understand why, the directors were able to tap into an uncanny feeling. The hybrid look to the lizard is a lot more disturbing than a full-on lizard because it feels like there's an emphasis on the experiment gone wrong. Almost like a perversion of science that wasn't meant to happen, and here are the results. And I'm a big fan of how the movie lent heavily into the uncanny feeling with the lizard. At times it's so cool yet unsettling to hear the noises that comes from him, emphasizing his more monstrous qualities. Can we just admit Andrew Spider-Man has got to go down as one of the bravest Spider-Men for fighting this thing. Like, spider powers or not, you'd never find me anywhere near this lizard. But anyway.
Yeah, that's really cool. The lizard was amazing. His sonic performance, his visual performance, his monstrous performance, it was just phenomenal. And I like the scene in the high school where they're fighting and Spider-Man is crawling all over his back like a spider and the lizard is trying to catch him. Just really cool stuff. It was a good lizard. He's actually right about that. Never thought about it.
It's compounding this peculiar design with the more monstrous qualities as we just highlighted. Sometimes the lizard felt like a horror character in this film, which corresponds with my next point. TASM doesn't really feel like a comic book movie at all, and I mean at all. At times it feels like it could pass as a mystery, a horror, a thriller, and ultimately a lot of this can be attributed to the composer of the film, James Horner, who had to say this when he was creating the soundtrack for the film.
But I wanted to add colors that you would never associate with a movie like that and pull out emotions that aren't associated with a movie like this.
I think it's the biggest reason personally as to why the film feels the most unique out of any Spider-Man movie and a lot of comic book films in general. Because whereas other films, most notably Spider-Man movies, have those goated orchestral themes such as Danny Elfman's themes, or Michael Giacchino's theme right at the end of No Way Home.
I don't think he got that because of copyright.
James Horner's theme, the best way I can describe it is that word again, grounded. Now, is it the best Spider-Man theme?
Absolutely fucking not.
As much as I love the realistic take on Spider-Man in this movie, the orchestral themes of Danny Elfman and Michael Giacchino are way too inspirational and fitting for Spider-Man. However, wait, hear me out. The score for this movie is powerful in its own way. It's one of those scores that can elicit a plethora of different feelings within the audience at any given moment. For example, the soundtrack that plays when Peter is in the Spider facility at Oscorp is almost fantastical while still remaining low-key, which helps to build intrigue and curiosity as to what's about to happen, even though we know what's about to happen. Another example, I guess, is the Briefcase soundtrack. Now, it's one of those...
That was a good Tony Stark meme there. We all know what's going to happen. We've seen this movie 1,000 times. Oh no, he stumbles into a restricted environment full of spiders and starts touching them. I wonder what will happen next. Such an easy telegraph for the audience. But hey, sometimes we just love fan service. We just want to be treated to seeing what we know we're going to see, but we still want to see it. And he's right about the music. Like, the orchestral themes and the swells are so amazing. And when they sync up with the web slinging and the exploration, it's so thrilling. You just can't replace it. So I really like that.
Soundtracks that plays a couple times during the film.
And they pump things. If you ask them to.
And each time really gets you to slow down and focus on what's going on in said scene. And that's the power of James Horner's score in The Amazing Spider-Man. So you know what? Yeah, this film isn't perfect and it has a lot of issues. I actually don't think it's the best Spider-Man movie. I think Spider-Man 2 still holds that crown. But it is my favorite Spider-Man movie because it gave us a new look at Spider-Man that I absolutely love, and it's given us so many unique things we may never see explored again in Spider-Man media.
Yeah, well done, Unorthodox. Well said. It was unique, and it gave us so many things that we would never be able to see be explored again in Spider-Man media. It was a fresh take on an old concept, and it breathed new life into it. I really do like it. I remember the Amazing Spider-Man series, and they were incredible. I really like Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and his suit. His suit was actually one of the best. He made a very good point there. And I think that there's some cool things that A2HEROES can incorporate from this story, from this Spider-Man, from this series. Cool little writing touchstones here and there. Cool little visual marks and cues. Nice little plot beats that fans would really love. So I'm glad you guys joined me for this video today. I love watching videos like this and breaking down my favorite movies. If you have any more to suggest, let me know. But I have a whole lot to get through, and I'm really looking forward to bringing you guys more. So thanks for joining me here, guys. Click the link below, check out the website, and join the mailing list. Take it easy.